This is the story of how a White Walker brought peace to Westeros in 587 days. We will be playing on Realm of Thrones version 6.0, along with combat mods to enhance the experience. We are Bran, the destroyer of the Frostark clan, a human White Walker hybrid who will breach the wall and destroy every enemy of the realm. They will see us as horrifying monsters that kill everything in their path, the embodiment of the end itself. But we won't be unintelligible beasts. We will carefully choose who we kill. Even though everyone will hate us, we will save the continent's future from the shadows. Now, for the backstory. Bran was experiencing one of his visions, witnessing the creation of the first White Walker. He tried to stop the children of the forest by interfering with the timeline, a foolish mistake. The children tied him to a tree and plunged dragonglass into his heart. He screamed as his eyes turned blue, his hair turned white, and his skin began to freeze. He had become a White Walker. He used all his power to wake up. He was back in the near present, but he was still a White Walker. His head pounded, and he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He was lost north of the wall as he tried to regain his intelligence. He evenly distributed his focus points to the skills he would need. He carried an ice sword and wore shabby armor. He sold the grain in his inventory as he could no longer eat anything. The villagers bought it, accustomed to trading with White Walkers. Bran asked what else they traded. The villager told him he could offer some boys to turn into walkers. Furious, Bran punched him in the face. He wanted to recruit soldiers to fight alongside him against the Night King, but no one was willing to join a walker's party. Bran had no idea how to form alliances to fulfill his goal. While wandering aimlessly, he stumbled upon a wildling party fighting bandits. He stepped in to help. The wildlings were terrified of him at first, but they eventually decided he was harmless, or at least not an immediate threat. Bran tried to cut down the bandits with his ice sword, but his swings barely tickled them. He was never good with swords, and being a White Walker hadn't changed that. After the fight, the wildlings offered him a peasant shirt and some food as a gesture of goodwill. One of the bandits Bran killed rose as a white and joined his party. Encouraged by this small victory, Bran tried to enter a wildling castle, believing they were friends now. But no one was willing to let a White Walker into their fiefs. He wandered aimlessly around the wall, constantly pursued by bandits. They were confident they could take down a White Walker, and they were right. But Bran was smarter than your average zombie. He baited a bandit party into chasing him near a wildling leader. The wildlings joined the fight, and together they marched against the bandits. Bran killed as many as he could, adding another white to his growing party. Slowly but surely, Bran's one-handed skill was leveling up, inching him closer to becoming a master warrior. He baited another bandit gang toward a wildling party, relying on them to carry the fight. Bran's damage was pathetic. At one point, he even dropped his sword while swinging at the high-tier bandits. He still had a long way to go before he could stand a chance against the Night King. After the battle, he captured a wildling ambusher as a prisoner. He planned to practice his magic on him, hoping to recruit him without destroying his body and skills like a white. Bran sold his loot in a nearby village and tried to speak with the wildling leader, but the leader refused to listen. He warned Bran that if he didn't bug off, he'd kill him. He continued to roam the north and finally managed to recruit the bandit without turning him into an unarmored, unskilled white. He was an undead as well, didn't need any food or money. Basically, a white with better fighting capabilities. Bandits kept chasing Bran, but none were fast enough to catch him. Eventually, he joined forces with another White Walker, Grendel, a 1,653-year-old walking corpse. The undead marched, and Bran plunged his ice sword through the bandits. However, he didn't gain any whites from the fight. It seemed Grendel had stolen them all. Bran tried to talk to him, but Grendel was unable to form intelligible words, or at least words Bran could understand. Like the wildlings, he prepared to attack Bran if he didn't bug off. So Bran roamed the frozen shore, searching for recruits to fill his army. Dozens of bandits were on his tail, but he managed to slip into their hideout before getting caught. He ordered his whites to follow as he marched inside. The first 3 bandits were no match for his forces. After the fight, Bran grabbed a shield from one of the dead bandits and continued deeper into the hideout. He preferred to fight one-on-one to raise his skills faster. The rest of the bandits proved little challenge. Their chief then stepped forward, demanding a fair duel. Bran agreed. The chief's two-handed axe was powerful, but Bran managed to deflect its blows. However, one heavy swing sent him crashing to the ground. Another swing came down to finish him off, but it barely missed. Scrambling to his feet, Bran continued to parry and stab. Finally, a well-placed swing to the chief's unarmored arm ended his life. Our undead soldiers screamed with joy. Bran gained 10 points in athletics and 10 in one-handed. 2 of our whites were ready to be upgraded, and we had captured 10 more prisoners to turn. However, we still hadn't found any decent loot. We desperately needed a proper shield, since we couldn't enter towns to buy gear. The dead from the hideout rose to join our ranks, increasing our party size to 23. Things were looking great, but 3 strong bandit parties were still chasing us. We couldn't offer them money to leave us alone. After all, we were a White Walker. With no other options, we decided to sacrifice our troops to guarantee our escape. 10 of our soldiers were lost along with some loot. We also lost our valor trait, but that was the least of our worries. After shaking them off, Bran attacked a smaller bandit party of 16, confident that his skills could make up for the difference in troop quality. He positioned his soldiers on a hill behind the forest, using the trees for cover against archers, while maintaining the high ground over their infantry. He ordered them to form a shield wall and attack as a mass. Bran did his best to deal damage, but the whites were no match for the bandit wildlings. Our forces were decimated in seconds, and the bandits turned their focus to Bran. Even though White Walkers only take 20% of the damage dealt, it still didn't take long for the bandits to bring him down. Unable to kill him and seeing no purpose in imprisoning him, they released him after the fight was over. We had lost all our troops and prisoners, but at least we gained some experience along the way. Bran rested in a nearby village to heal the cracks on his frozen skin. Once recovered, he continued hunting bandits with the help of other leaders. Bran finally encountered the Night King. Maybe by staying close to him, he could learn to control his powers. He wanted to join the Night King's army, but the king wasn't having it. He looked at Bran with confusion. He knew he hadn't created him, and he didn't trust Bran, but he wasn't sure if killing him was necessary. So, he let Bran go. Determined to prove his strength, Bran continued rebuilding his army by butchering bandits. During one raid, he looted a javelin, a valuable find in his poor state. Soon after, he stumbled upon a bandit party of 2 returning from a raid. They had prisoners Bran could use, so he attacked immediately. The battle was rough from the start. His single unarmored white was useless, falling the moment the fight began. Bran faced a heavily armored 2-handed pillager with an archer firing from behind. With precise parries and rapid stabs, he annihilated the warrior before the archer could land a hit. Then he dispatched the archer the same way. Though he lost his only white, the battle wasn't in vain. He earned 1 pillager prisoner, 2 northern caravan guards, and a few new whites to bolster his ranks. He found a hideout shortly after. With fewer parties roaming around, it was the perfect opportunity to rebuild his army. The hideout was easy to clear, just like the last one, and their chief was even more pathetic. We gained 8 more prisoners and at long last, a decent shield to protect ourselves with. Most importantly, we raised 18 more dead to join our party. With the experience gained, we maxed out our scouting, a skill we would desperately need when we declared our inevitable war. Not long after, Bran encountered 2 more bandit parties returning from a raid, hauling a load of prisoners. Their archers quickly decimated our useless whites, but we managed to neutralize them once we closed the distance. 5 of our whites fell, but 6 were ready to be upgraded. We added 4 more troops to our undead horde and took 4 more prisoners to wait in line. Bran finally found a leather armor to cover his distracting chest. Meanwhile, the Riverlands had joined Robb Stark's ranks and declared war against the crown. Our party was now strong enough to take on full bandit parties, but we weren't fast enough to catch them. Fortunately, we found another hideout very close to the previous one, giving a massive boost to our scouting skill. We cleared it without much trouble, gaining even more whites and prisoners. While chasing other bandit parties, Bran discovered 2 more hideouts, both set on top of the wall. Damn, the Night's Watch was really becoming incompetent. Before clearing the hideouts, he checked his party limit. It was 122, despite still being at the first clan tier. A magical buff named Undead Horde granted him a plus 102 bonus. As it turned out, White Walker's party limits increased by 3 per day to compensate for their inability to level up Steward, a downside of having troops that don't eat. It was also a grim sign of the impending long night. Anyway, Bran scaled the wall to clear out the bandits, helping his brother Jon without his knowledge. Damn, the north really looked wonderful from up here. Clearing the bandits was easy. Gravity, however, was the real challenge. Another hideout was cleared, and 18 more whites joined our horde. We marched toward the second hideout, but there was a problem. It had an unclimbable staircase, and at the top were 2 bandits. Bran ignored them for the moment and cleared the rest of the hideout. Afterward, he returned to deal with the 2 stranded bandits. His javelin sent the archer tumbling to the ground, allowing us to finish him off. But the infantry remained stuck. Bran's javelins didn't deal any damage, and the bandit wasn't in a position to fall. Unfortunately, we had to retreat, which meant we couldn't attack the hideout again for a while. We traveled north to sell our loot to the villages and returned to attack the hideout again. Thankfully, no one spawned at the top of the stairs this time. We cleared it without much trouble, earning more javelins and whites. In the meantime, another hideout had already spawned on the wall. While attacking it, we encountered a mysterious fighting tactic forged by the wildlings. The Sitting Bull strategy, highly effective at draining the enemy's morale. Once again, an infantryman was stuck on top of the stairs, and even 2 full bags of javelins weren't enough to bring him down. Bran tried everything to reach the top, but nothing worked. As cool as they looked, those hideouts definitely needed more work. With no other choice, we had to retreat and raise the dead elsewhere. Following the wall, we stumbled upon yet another hideout, and surprise, surprise, 2 more bandits were perched on top of the stairs. Bran managed to drop the archer again, and our pillager, God bless him, took down the infantry with his javelins. Maybe it's a skill issue, I don't know. We cleared the hideout, and our party finally hit the 100-member milestone. Clearing the previous hideout bumped it up to 120. We sold our massive haul to the northern villagers, and found even more hideouts to raid. Our army was now colossal, but we were moving slower than an 80-year-old Diddy. We desperately needed horses, so we visited a horse village called Antler. But despite Bran's pleas, they refused to sell their horses. He needed to grow his army to a much larger scale if he ever hoped to challenge the Night King, and he couldn't grow his army if he couldn't catch his enemies. With no other options, Bran decided to take the horses by force. Their 57 militia bravely stood against our horde. Our archers flanked while the infantry marched straight in. The militia put up quite a fight, but our overwhelming numbers were impossible to overcome. Their archers inflicted even more casualties, but they were eventually swarmed. 12 of our whites were upgraded. The villagers gave us what we wanted: 3 horses. Disappointingly low, but it was all they had. Now we were officially at war with the wildling armies. Every step had to be calculated. A single mistake could send us right back to the beginning. We continued targeting their militia without raiding villages to avoid alerting their leaders. Many families were left fatherless. Countless mothers lost their sons. Bran felt a deep guilt gnawing at him. but he knew there was no other choice. This was a small price to pay in the fight against the end of the world. With no armor to protect them, every horse he rode seemed to drop dead before the battle even started. Yet, flanking the enemy on foot proved to be a blessing in disguise. The close quarters combat earned him solid one-handed experience, finally allowing him to deal considerable damage. His army had grown to an enormous size, 272 undead soldiers following his orders without question. No fees, no food, an army any commander would dream of. But with great numbers came greater threats. Wildling leaders began to hunt us down. Sure, our numbers were intimidating, but a single high-tier wildling could shred through our weak whites in seconds, especially with RBM's combat module making the gears matter. And the 10 cannibals, those guys were on a whole other level. The strongest of the wildlings and the biggest threat to our survival. We needed to escape fast. Luckily, the few horses we had forcefully taken gave us just enough speed to barely outrun the wildling leaders. They chased us so far north that I doubt any other man aside from them had ever set foot on those frozen lands. Eventually, they gave up, and we were once again free to continue our grim work of slaughtering villagers. Meanwhile, rebellion was stirring in Mantaris. The rebels had risen against Aegon Targaryen, and no, this wasn't Jon Snow. Realm of Thrones, Aegon was a separate ruler, another ambitious contender for the Iron Throne. Not long after, Bran was struck by a vision. The mutiny at Craster's Keep. Jorah Mormont was dead, and Alistair Thorne had taken his place as the new Lord Commander. Back in his undead body, the villagers had stopped resisting Bran altogether. They no longer fought, they simply handed over whatever he demanded. If he wanted to keep growing his army, it was clear he needed to hunt bigger prey, their leaders. Dim Dalba became the first target. Bran hunted him relentlessly, chasing him around the wall. After a long and grueling pursuit, he finally cornered Dalba at the edge of the sea. There was nowhere left to run. Our archers moved forward while the infantry held their position. Their leader attempted to scout our troops alone, but Bran knocked him out after a brief chase. With that done, we advanced toward the enemy lines. Bran dealt some damage to their archers before dismounting to join the infantry in the clash. The 10 cannibals tore through our ranks with their two-handed axes. Bran couldn't deal any damage to them due to their heavy bronze armor. His shield broke, and with almost no health left, he could barely move. But he kept fighting. He dealt as much damage as he could before a projectile pierced his shoulder, knocking him straight into the snow. A caravan guard then took charge, continuing where Bran left off. Before long, the enemy infantry was overwhelmed and started to flee. We charged at their archers, who fled just as quickly. We managed to cut them down before they left the battlefield. We lost 96 troops, but the enemy's 83 dead would at least cover some of those losses when they rose again as whites. We also had 10 cannibal prisoners to recruit, a valuable addition that would give us the age we needed. 56 of our troops were ready for an upgrade, and we finally had a skull cape to cover our shoulders. We executed the wildling leader, claiming a horse harness from his corpse. The battle also earned us considerable experience in all areas. Afterward, we targeted villages with enough militia to give our novice whites the experience they needed. More wildling blood was spilled, and along the way, we added a spear to our arsenal. Thrusting weapons would be our only hope against heavily armored units. We tested it against another village militia. Lands they once called home were now flooded with walking corpses. Bran questioned whether all this bloodshed was truly necessary, but the scent of destruction and despair had seduced him into slaughtering more wildlings. While teaching his whites how to swim, he spotted another wildling party on the shore. They were disorganized from a recent battle, an easy target. Bran quickly emerged from the sea and cornered them. Among their ranks were 5-10 cannibals we could imprison. We launched the attack immediately. Bran charged with his horse, using hit-and-run tactics until he dropped his spear to the ground. Dismounting, he engaged in a duel with one of the 10 cannibals while the infantry clashed. Before their duel could end, our whites had already overwhelmed the enemy. Their leader was running around our army, taunting us. Eventually, our archers took down his horse, and he was knocked out shortly after. We suffered only one casualty and captured even more high-tier prisoners. Another wildling leader was executed, with an army of 1,000 wildlings marching toward us. We quickly set sail. On the water, we encountered a small party from the Company of the Cat. Their cavalry force wouldn't stand a chance in a sea battle, Bran thought. We boarded their ship, and just as expected, the enemy was wiped out in seconds. We executed their leader and upgraded our chess piece with his. We then returned to the wildling lands for more destruction. While playing a game of chase with their leaders, Bran had a vision of Robb executing Lord Karstark. "Oh, foolish brother," he muttered to himself. Later, we joined a battle between the Night King and a wildling leader. Fighting alongside our sworn enemy to gain his trust felt dirty, but Bran's hands were already stained enough. He dueled the enemy leader, but before he could finish him, an arrow knocked the wildling out. The enemy infantry was quickly swarmed from all sides, and we won with only 3 casualties. After the battle, we returned to Antler village to take more horses for our army. This time, the villagers handed them over without resisting. Not long after, Bran caught up with one of Craster's wives and her army, thanks to the help of the Night's Watch. Corin Halfhand was desperate enough to work with even White Walkers, as long as the wildlings were dead. Ironic. Bran and the Spearwife dueled at the edge of a cliff. She managed to knock Bran from his horse, but he dropped her right after and pierced her guts with his spear. Her army put up a much better fight than she did, managing to take down quite a few of the Night's Watchmen. Afterwards, Bran cornered another wildling leader by carefully maneuvering around the terrain. We quickly tore through their forces, and Bran engaged the leader in a duel. He managed to kill the wildling's horse before it could charge at him, but the wildling proved highly skilled in close combat. He forced Bran to drop his shield and relentlessly slashed him with a short cleaver, never giving Bran a chance to raise his spear. Bleeding and barely holding on, Bran finally came out on top by driving his spear between the wildling's legs. The fight was over just before Bran could lose consciousness. Afterwards, Bran forcefully took even more horses from Antler village. It didn't do much to improve our party's speed considering we had 400-foot troops, but even a slight boost could prove helpful, maybe. He then joined forces with his fellow White Walker, Raymun, to attack the Weeper's army of 368. Both sides had powerful infantry. Bran flanked the enemy from behind, cutting down many with his overhead strikes. Before long, their infantry was wiped out. As our army turned its attention to the archers, Bran noticed something terrifying. The enemy had a goddamn giant. He rushed to help his whites, but his attacks barely scratched the monster, dealing only 1 damage or even 0 at times. Our infantry swarmed the giant, and although it stubbornly refused to die, the constant stun from our attacks prevented it from dealing any damage back. Eventually, the beast was knocked out. With the giant down, we swiftly cleaned up the remaining forces. The battle was won, though at the cost of 24 casualties. Many of our undead were ready for an upgrade, and we now had an elder giant as a prisoner. Recruiting him could potentially quadruple our army's strength. With our medicine skill increased, we faced an important choice: Doctor's Oath or Sledges. Oath would help level up our medicine skill immensely and allow us to imprison high-tier troops. However, we could only recruit so many prisoners, and this perk would reduce the number of whites we gained from each battle. While Sledges wasn't particularly useful for us, the negatives of Oath seemed to outweigh its positives. In the end, we made our choice. Ygritte managed to escape the battlefield, and shortly after, Lord of Bones slipped away from our party before we could execute him. The rest of the wildlings had already been wiped out by Raymun. We then cornered another wildling leader, Faramir, 6 Skins. His party starved to unconsciousness as we relentlessly chased him down. 3 prisoners and another execution for us to enjoy. Meanwhile, a wildling army of 800 was besieging the wall. Alistair Thorne and his forces couldn't seem to decide whether to attack or retreat, pacing back and forth in an endless loop. We waited for an opportunity to intervene, but the wildlings simply gave up after losing a few troops and disbanded shortly after. With their army scattered, the wildling parties found themselves cornered. The Night's Watch at their backs and the Night King at their front. We joined forces with our nemesis, the Night King, and attacked. Bran cleared the enemy infantry with his spears, and the battle was won without much trouble. One of the 10 impalers we had recruited made a name for himself after racking up 10 kills. We promoted him to a companion and trained him in stewardship, medicine, and engineering. The fight earned us a good number of 10 cannibals and a 10 helmet for Bran. Maxing out his drip, we executed all the imprisoned leaders, including Tormund Giantsbane. May the giant woman be with him in the afterlife. Alfyn Scarlet had 125 in stewardship, just enough to give us exactly what we needed. Thanks to him, discarded weapons and armor would now grant our troops experience based on their value, considering our biggest weakness was having an army full of low-tier units. This was a complete game changer for us. Shortly after, we encountered Mance Rayder's great army of 600. We attacked him near our White Walker friend, Jendal. With his support, the tide quickly turned in our favor. During the battle, Bran spotted Ygritte. With a swing of his ice sword, he knocked her from her horse, then pierced her pretty face with his spear. Dismounting to aid his infantry, he joined the relentless onslaught that struck fear into the hearts of the enemy. They retreated to reposition, but soon only peasants were left to stand against us. As usual, their archers inflicted massive casualties, but once we closed the distance, they were swiftly destroyed. Another 10 impaler proved his worth by racking up 8 kills. We rewarded him with athletics and party skills. By the end of the fight, 36 of our troops were ready to be upgraded, and after discarding our recent loot, 48 more joined them. Unfortunately, Mance Rayder and Ygritte managed to escape the battlefield, leaving us with only one leader to execute. Afterward, we discarded all the loot we had gathered up to this point, upgrading 225 troops in the process. The wildlings were doomed. We laid siege to Craster's Keep. Our siege preparations were completed before the defenders could even build a single mangonel. Bran was the first to climb the ladder, carving out a safe space to flank the enemy. For long, our infantry scaled the walls and joined the fight. Bran helped them cut down the high-tier enemies before shifting his focus to the archers scattered throughout the fortress. One by one, he hunted them down until the battle was won. Another 10 impalers joined our clan, Erak the Loyal. Despite losing 156 troops, we now had our first fief. We set the daily defaults to train militia and activated improved garrisons to fill the castle. Afterward, we executed Styr Magnar, the leader of the Tens, and donned full 10 armor. As we waited inside our newly conquered walls, on the 10th day of autumn, 300, Bran saw a vision of Renly Baratheon being killed by his own brother Stannis. The Stormlands were no more. When we checked our party, we found that the elder giant we had imprisoned earlier was ready to rise as an undead and join our ranks. Now, we were truly a force to be reckoned with. We attacked another wildling army alongside Cotter Pike. Another brutal fight, another crushing defeat for the wildlings, and another 10 cannibal joined our clan, Bale the Marauder. Before the battle ended, we noticed the enemy had 2 elder giants on their side. We managed to knock both of them out, but only one survived for imprisonment. After the fight, we discovered the wildling army had captured our brother, Jon Snow. We invited him to our army to speak with him, but our words were unintelligible to him. Fear clouded his expression, but he still recognized Bran's face, even with its rotten, frozen skin. Sadness weighed heavy in his eyes. Bran let him go. Jon had no place in our undead horde. Bran continued his conquest and besieged the Feast of the First Man. A giant stood waiting at the top of the ladders to meet us, but as soon as our infantry arrived, he proceeded out and climbed higher to join his friends. The walls were swarmed with enemy troops, attacking Bran from all sides until they knocked him down inside the castle. Bran cleared countless archers positioned in the center, painting the castle red, but our army still hadn't managed to breach the walls. He helped his giant, though it hardly seemed necessary, and kept cutting down archers one by one. Eventually, he shifted focus to helping his troops climb the walls. By then, 331 of our forces had already fallen. He tried to take down the enemy giant with his troops, but the beast was too strong. Bran retreated back to the walls, letting more of his soldiers swarm the giant. After countless strikes, the monster finally fell. The Fist of the First Man was finally ours. Our own giant had taken down 11 enemy soldiers before going down. The battle gave our troops plenty of experience, and we now had another elder giant as a prisoner. We waited inside our newly conquered castle to heal our wounded. 2 imprisoned giants were now ready to join our undead horde. Right afterwards, we caught Mance Raider's party completely disorganized. Bran charged straight at Mance, unhorsing him with ease. Then, in the spirit of a fair fight, he dismounted, but cowardly, Mance fled. Bran gave chase, and after a brief pursuit, Mance finally found the courage to stand his ground. It didn't matter. Bran's ice sword knocked him out swiftly, and his army crumbled soon after. Another 10 Impaler joined our clan. Brog, the Anvil, the Wild King, was finally captured, and with his army's destruction came the release of Alliser Thorn from captivity. After Mance Raider's execution, the Wildlings crowned the Weeper as their new king. The Night's Watch had laid siege to Hornfoot, a castle bordering our lands. We watched from a distance, expecting them to fail, but before they could, the Wildlings turned their sights on us, sieging the Feast of the First Man. Their new king, the Weeper, had rallied an army of 700. They outnumbered us, but surrender was never an option. This was our land, and we would defend it to the last. Their army boasted 2 giants and hordes of 10 cannibals. An incredible reward was at stake. We engaged without hesitation. The battlefield was small, and the clash began before we could lose too many units to their archers. Bran's overhead swings cut down wildling after wildling. The battle was brutal and dragged on, as their giants held firm against countless blows. Eventually, our forces overwhelmed them. As the enemy tried to reposition, we cut down many retreating soldiers. Then came the second wave. With their high-tier troops already eliminated, it didn't take long to break them. Their archers swarmed the snowy battlefield, but fell just as quickly under our relentless onslaught. One of our 10 impalers, Sigorn the Red, earned his place as a companion after racking up 13 kills. Unfortunately, none of the enemy giants survived for imprisonment. We executed every captured leader, including Ygritte and their new king, the Weeper. The Wildlings crowned Anna Moonsinger as their new queen, but most of their clans now stood at the brink of collapse. We returned to Hornfoot to keep an eye on the Night's Watch army, but they disbanded before finishing the siege, so we picked up where they left off. We built a battering ram and launched the assault. A few 10 cannibals waited for us at the ladders, but Bran cut them down with ease. The castle wasn't strong enough to hold back our undead horde. Their forces were overrun in no time. With only 26 casualties, the castle was ours. This time we held on to the loot instead of discarding it for experience. We planned to sell it once we capture the town. And what will we do with all that money? Ah, you'll see, my friend. You'll see. We marched toward the town of Ten and laid siege to it. We built catapults and kept them in reserve until the full battery was ready. Their walls were strong, reinforced by numerous mangonels, but we destroyed every last one, along with the walls themselves. When the gates lay in ruins, we launched our assault, swarming the town through the shattered entrance. Their militia and garrison crumbled in no time. With only 17 casualties, the city was ours. Once again, we found our brother Jon among the captives. Once again, we let him go. Bro will never learn his lesson. With the town of Ten now flying the banner of Frostark, Bran finally had a throne to rest upon. The town's residents had all been turned, either walkers or whites. And with no need for food, money or free will, the constant dissatisfaction of the free folk had completely disappeared. For the first time, Bran's guilt was replaced by something else: pride. After selling all the gathered loot for over 500,000 golden dragons, Bran visited the tavern. His white subjects seemed happy in their own eerie way. No complaints, no rebellion, just silent obedience. As he wandered, he noticed a crowd of his white folk gathered around a massive figure, a giant. This giant had an odd fondness for gold. He offered to recruit more giants for Bran for the right price. Without hesitation, Bran paid 100,000 golden dragons for 10 giants, then another 300,000. By the time he was done, 43 giants stood under his command. Determined to strengthen his forces further, Bran spent another 100,000 golden dragons to train his troops in the arena. Upgrading the newly experienced units cost an additional 30,000. But with most of his army wounded, they would need time to recover before marching again. A storm was brewing, and Bran would make sure Frostark was ready. During this time, a tournament was hosted in Frostark, with the legendary Ice Spear as the grand reward. Bran joined without hesitation. The whites posed little challenge, falling with ease to his blade. But facing his White Walker companions was another story. Their 80% damage reduction and heavy armor made them nearly impossible to kill. Each strike barely chipped away at their health, turning the fight into a grueling battle of endurance. However, Bran discovered that breaking their guard while they blocked dealt percentage-based health damage, making it possible, though painfully slow, to end the fight. After a prolonged and torturous struggle, Bran finally claimed the victory. The masterwork Ice Spear was his, an incredibly powerful thrusting weapon that would make cutting through high-tier units a breeze. With this new weapon in hand, Frostark's undead king was more dangerous than ever. Right after the tournament, Bran saw a vision of the Battle of Blackwater. Stannis had retreated to Dragonstone after his crushing defeat. Not long after, news arrived that Aegon Targaryen's kingdom, Valyria, had been wiped out. With our troops fully recovered, we marched toward another wildling town, Frostfang's camp. The Lord of Bones was inside the town, making it a prime target. We built trebuchets and smashed their walls just like before. However, breaching the town was far more challenging this time, due to the sheer number of 10 cannibals. Bran slipped behind enemy lines and dealt devastating damage with his Ice Spear, allowing our undead horde to swarm the city. The wildlings attempted to reposition on the walls, swarming the narrow passage to hold us back. But eventually, we cleared the walls as well. Frostfang's camp was ours with only 22 casualties. The Lord of Bones and another wildling leader were executed. Determined to finish off the wildlings once and for all, we marched to their remaining fiefs. On the way, we received news of the Dothraki Khalasar's destruction. Just before we could lay siege to Frozen Shore, we encountered the Night King's army, 1,150 high-tier whites. We realized we had to grow much stronger before taking him down. During our siege preparations, we learned that Frostfang's camp was under siege. We had no time to waste. We launched an immediate assault on Frozen Shore and swiftly wiped out the defenders. Bran was gravely wounded, but managed to take down many wildlings before falling. Len the Loyal took command and cleared the remaining forces with his bronze axe. Frozen Shore was ours with only 19 casualties. Our giants had racked up an impressive number of kills during the battle. We stationed some whites in the garrison and marched toward Frostfang's camp to defend it. But the wildlings managed to retake the city before we could arrive. Undeterred, we besieged the town once again, while the army of 300 wildlings that had just conquered it watched helplessly. With the walls still in ruins, we launched an immediate assault. The slaughter was brutal. The militia and the traitorous whites who had rebelled against our will were cut down without mercy. Crossfang's camp was ours again in no time. The wildling army waiting outside managed to slip away, evading both our grasp and the Night King's advancing forces. We hid between the mountains, watching and waiting to see if any army would dare to besiege the town again, but no one came. We traveled east to take the last remaining wildling stronghold, Hardhome. It was defended by 800 warriors, with many wildling parties united inside the city. As we laid siege to it, news of Tyrosh's destruction reached us. Then Bran saw another vision, Roose Bolton's treacherous plot with the Lannisters. Perhaps there was still a chance to save his brother Robb, if he was fast enough. But the Night King remained the greater threat, the very embodiment of doom. To save humanity, Bran needed to conquer the north and forge an army strong enough to face him. As usual, we built our trebuchets and shattered Hardhome's walls. Many defenders had starved to unconsciousness by the time the assault began. With his ice spear, Bran cut down their high-tier warriors, breaking their ranks. When our giants stormed through the broken gates, the battle descended into chaos. The snow turned crimson as bodies piled high. Endless waves of wildlings swarmed us, crushing each other in a frenzy of disorder. But in the end, the city was buried under a sea of their corpses. We had won. On the 7th day of autumn, 301, the free folk were no more. We executed all the captured leaders, leaving no one to rally the wildlings again. Inside Hardhome's tavern, we found someone unexpected, Benjen Stark. Our uncle had fully turned into a White Walker, his icy gaze devoid of humanity, yet he stood ready to serve under Bran's banner. Our companion limit was full, but we were on the verge of upgrading our clan tier. Only 14 more renown was needed. The next day, a tournament was held in Hardhome. Bran joined without hesitation. The reward was another ice sword, one we already had, but the renown was what we truly needed. After a grueling series of fights against our own powerful companions, we claimed victory, earning 11 renown, just 3 more to go. After the tournament, Bran reached 10 attribute points in intelligence. Maxing out his medicine skill was now within reach, a crucial advantage if we were to stand a chance against the Night King. After leaving the city, we caught a disorganized wildling party. Bran drove his ice spear through their leader's abdomen, and the rest of her army collapsed soon after. Yet, it only yielded 3 renown, leaving us just 1 point short. Determined to reach the next tier, we hunted down a bandit party. Our troops made quick work of them, granting us that final renown we needed. Clan Tier 4 was finally ours. We returned to Hardhome without delay, ready at last to recruit our uncle, Benjen Stark. Shortly after, Bran saw a vision of the Red Wedding. His mother, brother, and sister-in-law were all brutally slaughtered. A deep pain burned within him, anger unlike anything he had ever felt. The traitors of Westeros would have to pay for their sins. But first, the Night King had to be destroyed. With vengeance burning in his heart, Bran focused on preparing his army. The loot he had sold amassed a fortune of 1 million gold dragons. Yet gold alone wouldn't be enough. The Night King was no ordinary enemy. He had 300 in every skill, including medicine, granting his troops immense health and damage bonuses. Bran needed a much stronger force. He spent 135,000 gold dragons on training his troops, and waited patiently for their wounds to heal, gaining valuable medicine skill along the way. During this time, another vision struck him, the Purple Wedding. The bastard Joffrey was no more, and Tyrion had fled the realm, without killing his father, Tywin. The Game of Thrones continued, but Bran had no time for it now. On the 7th day of spring, 302, the Riverlands were destroyed. As if summoned by fate, Stannis sailed toward the Wall. another sinner marching straight to Bran's doorstep. Before confronting the Night King, Bran bolstered his ranks once more, purchasing 60 more giants from his good friend Magmar Tundo Weg. He poured his remaining gold into one final round of training, depleting his coffers entirely. Once his troops were fully healed and stronger than ever, there was no more waiting. The time had come. They marched to find the Night King's undead horde. The final battle for the fate of Westeros awaited. We found him near Hardhome's shores. The Night King himself, commanding an army of 1,368 high-tier units. This was it. The battle that would determine the fate of the North. As Bran faced him, the Night King finally understood the truth. Bran wasn't just another enemy. He was the enemy. The only one who had earned the king's true hatred. And Bran felt the same. The battle of the frozen nemesis had begun. Two undead hordes marched relentlessly toward each other. The clash inevitable. Bran charged directly at the Night King, ready to face him in single combat. But the king stepped back, his cold gaze dismissive, as if the duel was nothing more than an unnecessary hassle. With his challenge ignored, Bran turned to assist his forces. The battlefield echoed with the sharp hum of throwing axes and javelins, both sides exchanging deadly volleys. When Bran's army began its charge, the enemy infantry retreated to reposition. But this was no retreat. The Night King was flanking our forces from behind. Realizing the danger, Bran raced to intercept. The Night King's horse was brought down, leaving him unhorsed, and surrounded by a circle of vengeful giants and wights. They struck him relentlessly, each blow landing with brutal force. Trapped in the onslaught, he was unable to move, a god brought low by his own kind. He held out longer than any mortal could, and the tide of battle surged forward. We ordered our soldiers to hold their fire, ensuring they formed a unified line instead of wasting projectiles on the backline. The Night King's sadistic wights were disturbingly durable, but Bran's icy spear pierced through their armor with deadly precision. Both sides were powerful, locked in a brutal stalemate where neither could effectively finish the other. Yet, Bran's relentless strikes and the raw strength of our giants tipped the scales. After an exhausting clash, the enemy wights retreated to reposition. Their second wave filled the snowy battlefield with a deadly hail of projectiles. Many of our forces fell before the lines could even meet. But when the clash resumed, brutal and drawn out, we once again emerged on top. The enemy retreated, repositioning for yet another attempt. Then came the third wave. By now, their elite Tier 6 units were depleted. This time, the battlefield filled with Tier 5 shielded infantry and horsemen. Weaker armor, slower movements, easy prey for Bran's spear. He tore through their ranks, shattering shield walls and felling horsemen like they were nothing. It didn't take long before this wave was crushed as well. As we charged at their archers, fear spread through the enemy ranks. Bows clattered to the ground as they turned to run in terror. But there was no escape. We hunted them down to the last. The battle of the frozen nemesis had ended. Though victorious, the cost was not light. 3 of our giants had fallen, mighty warriors whose towering strength had taken down 119 wights. Their sacrifice was the foundation of our victory. As the snow settled, the battlefield lay painted in blood, shattered limbs and broken weapons, disturbingly forming the White Walker's twisted symbol. The Night King was no more. With his destruction, every White Walker and White he had turned vanished into the ether. The army of the dead was gone. Across the 7 kingdoms, the curse of the undead finally lifted. Reanimated bodies collapsed like the hollow sacks of bones they truly were. Cheers echoed from every corner of Westeros. The long night ended before it even began. But what about Bran and his undead horde? They remained as unyielding as cockroaches after a nuclear blast, untouched by death, unfazed by time. Yet something was different. Bran felt a strange creeping sensation clawing at the edges of his mind. A vision flooded his thoughts. The Night King, eternal silence, eternal darkness, eternal peace. A world without pain, without sadistic tyrants and spoiled brats. A world cleansed of the diddies and diddlers who had poisoned it for too long. It was calm, serene, perfect. Then Bran's body began to move on its own. Slow, ritualistic motions beyond his control. His breath came cold and sharp as frost gathered on his fingertips. The truth hit him like a frozen dagger. The Night King was a part of him now. Always had been, always would be. Nothing could change that. Darkness crept into his frozen heart, wrapping it in an unbreakable grip. He reached down, lifting the Night King's armor and fastening it to his chest. The frost fit too well, as if it had been waiting for him all along. Without a word, Bran turned and marched with his undead horde. The snow crunched beneath their feet as they moved south. The living thought they were finally safe. They celebrated in the warmth of their hearts, believing the long night had ended. But they couldn't see the real danger growing alongside them. Our first stop was Driftwood Hall. The war began with a single strike. Bran knocked out one of their leaders in a swift, brutal charge. The message was clear. Peace was over. The enemy army, to their credit, positioned themselves smartly on top of a hill. Their archers rained arrows down on us, claiming a few of our whites. But in the end, they were mortal, and we were not. Their formation crumbled under the weight of our endless horde. With no time to regroup, we marched straight to the Driftwall, catching them before they could finish building their mangonel. The assault was brutal and swift. Our undead giants tore down their defenses with ease, while Bran's ice spear carved through their ranks like they were made of snow. In mere moments, Skagos was no more. Another kingdom wiped from the map, another memory lost to the cold. But Bran's mind was elsewhere. He had reached 250 in medicine, another step toward perfection. With the 275 perk, our undead horde would become something more. Something truly undead. The living world still believed it could fight back. Bran was about to prove them wrong. After our victory at Driftwood Hall, we decided to treat ourselves. A sick-looking lion shield fit for a king, or whatever Bran had become. We also bought more giants, our final batch from beyond the wall. With our remaining gold, we trained them just like before. This was it. Our last giants for the rest of the conquest. There was no going back. Once our troops healed, we marched towards the wall, the final barrier, the last defense of the living. We built every melee siege engine we could. We desperately needed them. The 700-foot-tall ice wall stood like a monument to mankind's hubris, and we were about to bring it down. As our soldiers carried the heavy engines forward under the protection of our giants, the Night's Watch rained bolts down upon us. Crossbows punched through our whites with merciless precision, turning many to lifeless heaps of ice and bone. But Bran was undeterred. He climbed the siege tower and began the perilous ascent. The journey was long, dangerous, and far more grueling than he had anticipated. Many of our soldiers fell from the cliffs, their brittle bodies shattering upon impact. Gravity, it seemed, was our greatest enemy. Bran's frozen shoulders ached with every pull, but he pushed forward. Above him, Night's Watch soldiers tumbled from the sky like flies, screaming as they met the same fate they had given to our whites. Yet when Bran finally neared the top, he realized something chilling. None of his soldiers had matched his speed. He was alone. Bran had to face the walls alone. Quiet and methodical, he dispatched one archer after another, moving like a shadow through the frozen ramparts, until he stumbled upon a full group of them. Their light armor and one-handed swords were no match for him. Group after group fell, their blood painting the ice red. But the enemy felt endless. For every 10 dead men, 12 more seemed to crawl from the barracks to replace them. Meanwhile, in the tunnel beneath, a brutal meat grinder unfolded. Our giants filled the narrow space, turning it into a claustrophobic massacre. Then the Loyal led the charge, hacking and smashing his way through the Night's Watch. Men screamed in terror as he carved a path straight into Castle Black. Bran wanted to descend and join the slaughter below, but more soldiers flooded the wall to stall him. He slashed through them all, holding the wall alone. Shielded infantry marched forward in formation, but his ice spear pierced through their shields, and his ice sword tore through their flesh like parchment. Every inch of his armor dripped with blood, arrows jutting out of him like a cursed porcupine. He had killed over 120 men, yet they kept coming. Finally, after more relentless slaughter, the wall was cleared. Bran marched toward the elevator, but it was crawling with more enemies. He fought through them, but the elevator took off before he could clear it completely. Meanwhile, our army had breached Castle Black. The remaining Night's Watch forces tried to reposition on the wall, but it was too late. Each time the elevator returned, more soldiers arrived, only to meet Bran. One by one, they fell. Our giants eventually rode the elevator to the top, crushing the last remnants of resistance. Yet a few stubborn soldiers had perched themselves on the cliffs in the middle of the wall. Bran grabbed a rock, threw it down at one of them, and shattered the wooden platform beneath his feet. Gravity did the rest. The wall and Castle Black were ours. Including Ed and Gren, we executed every captured man from the Night's Watch. No quarter, no mercy. With the wall and Castle Black under our control, we wasted no time marching toward the remaining castles of the Night's Watch. As expected, Alliser Thorne took the opportunity to raid our wildling villages, capturing our white women. Classic Alliser. The Night Fort crumbled with little resistance. Once again, we found our brother Jon Snow captured, but this time by us. We threw him into the Night Fort's dungeon, not as a prisoner, but to keep him safe from the dangers of the war. Only Shadow Tower remained. The last bastion of the Night's Watch put up a respectable fight, clinging to survival with desperate determination. But in the end, the castle fell. The Night's Watch was no more. 2 days later, Jon Snow shocked us all by joining the Summer Isles, leaving the continent for good. Bran could hardly believe it. Jon making a smart choice was a rare sight indeed. Another 2 days passed. Alliser Thorne joined Braavos, running from justice like the rat he was. Cutter Pike joined Sarnor, another deserter clinging to life. With the Night's Watch wiped from existence, it was time to turn our gaze south. And who better to start with than Stannis the Mannis himself? We struck first by attacking one of his vassals right in front of the wall. Their dragon riders were a force to be reckoned with, but no matter how high they soared, our undead horde swarmed them the moment they touched the ground. Bran personally dueled Andrew Estermont, cutting him down with cold precision. Once the riders fell, the battle was ours. Without wasting time, we laid siege to Eastwatch, now occupied by Stannis' forces. But as we prepared for the assault, news reached us. Karstark was besieging our night fort. We had no choice but to storm Eastwatch with haste. Swarmed from 3 sides, their garrison collapsed under our might. The entire wall was finally ours. Marching to defend the Night Fort, we arrived just in time to see Karstark's army break the siege and retreat to reinforce 2 other armies besieging the Shadow Tower, but they scattered like rats the moment we approached. We simply couldn't catch them. Each time we left the Shadow Tower, they returned to besiege it. Finally, Davos' army made a fatal mistake. They cornered themselves and our horde fell upon them like a winter storm. Though Davos slipped away, we captured Saladhor Saan and Septa Unella, who had joined Stannis' forces after Cersei's rise to power. We executed both on the spot. Davos ran as fast as his old legs could carry him. Karstark's army returned yet again to harass the Shadow Tower, running at the first sight of us. This time, we ignored them, let them play their games. We marched to destroy Stannis' remaining fiefs. Our first target was High Point, which we reduced to rubble. Among the captives was Celis Baratheon, Stannis' fanatical wife. We executed the crazy bitch without hesitation. With blood still dripping from our blades, we returned to defend the Shadow Tower once more. Finally, Karstark's army had nowhere left to run. We annihilated their forces, and this time we spared no one. Every captured member was executed. The north was painted red with blood, and we were just getting started, with Karholt standing as the last bastion of Stannis Baratheon's fading legacy. We marched with cold determination. The town was packed. Stannis, Blackfish, and countless other lords huddled behind its walls. 1,244 strong defenders awaited us. We built our trebuchets under constant pressure, as their mangonels fired relentlessly. Their speed gave us trouble, but persistence won the day. The walls crumbled and their garrison, weakened by starvation, made a desperate charge outside the breach. It was a slaughter. What followed was a brutal meat grinder at the narrow gap in the walls. Blood soaked the snow as both sides clashed viciously, but Bran, ever the tactician, flanked them from behind, cutting down their elite units with ruthless efficiency. Once we swarmed the town center, the rest fell like dominoes. In the chaos, Bran dueled Axel Florent, cutting him down with ease. Stannis was already lying in the dirt, knocked out before he could even draw Lightbringer. Their final stronghold was no more. The Dragonstone Baratheons had fallen. After the battle, we indulged in the spoils of war. Bran mounted a white unicorn, his new companion, a surprising contrast to his dark undead army. Look at that cutie pie. To match the new aesthetic, we draped ourselves in a sleek Dragonstone cape, maximizing our blackened drip. Every captured lord was brought forth. Blackfish, Axel, and finally, the sinner Stannis himself. Bran swapped his iconic ice sword with Lightbringer, curious to test the so-called Blade of Legend. But the real power spike came with the long-awaited 275 medicine perk. Our undead horde had become truly undead. With Karholt reduced to rubble and our undead horde stronger than ever, we turned our gaze to the last heart, the seat of the traitorous Umbers. Declaring war on them meant declaring war on Cersei Lannister, their queen. 2 birds, 1 spear. The Umbers were severely outnumbered. Caught completely off guard, they scrambled to build their first mangonel, but we didn't give them the time. We swarmed the walls with brutal efficiency, and the gates soon followed. And the breach came, their defenders crumbled like dry leaves. Outmatched and overwhelmed, the Umbers failed miserably. In mere moments, their last foothold was reduced to a graveyard of shattered steel and broken bones. With the last heart reduced to ashes, we set our sights on the Dreadfort, home to the treacherous Roose Bolton. There would be no patience, no slow siege. We assaulted the fort without wasting time on engines, relying on brute force and sheer fury. The Dreadfort's towering walls were a nightmare to breach. Arrows rained down like a storm of needles, and the narrow passages funneled our horde into a brutal meat grinder. But Bran was relentless. Flanking the defenders from behind, he carved his way through countless Boltons, his ice sword painting the stone red. By the time the fort was cleared, Bran could barely stand, severely wounded, bleeding out, and dragging himself forward with sheer will. But he didn't fall, not until the last soldier hit the ground. There would be no more flayed corpses hanging from these walls, only frozen ones. Unfortunately, neither Ramsay nor Roose Bolton were captured during the siege, but we made do with what we had. Every Lannister and Bolton who fell into our hands was executed without hesitation. The North remembers, with Lightbringer proving too unwieldy in the tight chaos of close quarters. Bran re-equipped his trusted ice sword. Its shorter range made it far more effective in the thick of battle. As for distant foes, his ice spear would do the talking. Our next target was none other than Winterfell, our home, tainted by Bolton Field. Its 900 defenders stood ready, with Roose Bolton himself cowering behind our ancestral walls. The walls were unbreakable, but so was our will. We built every siege engine we could muster, sending them marching forward under a storm of arrows. Our soldiers fell in waves, riddled with bolts, but Bran pressed on, with countless arrows embedded in his frozen flesh. He carried the siege tower single-handedly, fueled by rage and the cold determination of the Night King. When the tower's gate slammed open, Bran charged. Shields clashed, spears pierced the air, but a brutal blow from a Bolton spearman sent Bran crashing from the tower. Undeterred, he climbed again with furious haste. The Boltons fought like cornered rats, desperate to cling to the home they defiled. Spears struck Bran from all sides, but he found brief shelter in the archer's tower. After clearing it with ruthless efficiency, he returned to aid his infantry in swarming the walls. But the Boltons were resilient. Their shields were massive, nearly impenetrable. Even Bran's ice spear struggled to break through. Our elder giants roared and pressed forward. But Winterfell was no ordinary fortress. It tested us. After a brutal battle that drained both sides, the high-tier garrison and Roose Bolton's elite troops finally fell. Yet the fight wasn't over. The Boltons regrouped, forming a desperate horde around another archer tower. Our forces on the wall faltered. Bran fought like a force of nature, but even he was mortal, or something close to it. He fell, overwhelmed by the sheer number of foes. But Len the Loyal was there to answer the call. With Bran down, Len took command. He marched through the broken main gate, his rapier dancing through Bolton ranks with surgical precision. No mercy, no hesitation. He climbed the tower, cutting down the last of the Bolton horde. At last, Winterfell was ours once again, but it was different now. No longer the proud seat of House Stark. It was something colder, darker, Frostark. As for Roose Bolton, there would be no dungeons. We executed the traitor. Len the Loyal donned Rose's flayed red armor. With Winterfell finally reclaimed, Bran walked through his homeland, or what was left of it. The air hung heavy with frost. The once lively halls now silent except for the faint creak of bones. Every familiar face was now an undead husk, healing and enjoying their endless time on this frozen earth. What once was life had been replaced by something colder. He climbed the familiar steps between the stone wolf statues, each stride echoing through the empty courtyard. His trusty whites guarded the castle with unwavering loyalty, ensuring no foreign hand would ever defile it again. Winterfell belonged to its true lord now. Bran took his place on the throne, cold, unmoving, but undeniably his. The weight of it felt right. The Lord of Frostark had come home. From the shadows of the Great Hall emerged Rodrik Cassel, the old master at arms. Even with Bran's frozen flesh and icy gaze, Rodrik recognized him. There was no mistaking his true lord. He knelt and welcomed Bran home, his voice steady despite the unnatural chill in the air. He offered a proposition to recruit the legendary Stark household elites to fight alongside Bran's undead horde. These soldiers, loyal even in death, were far stronger than the brittle whites. Bran handed him a pouch of coin to cover the expenses. Gold meant little to the dead, but loyalty was priceless. The Stark units were trained to their peak, maximizing their strength. What once defended Winterfell in life would now bring ruin in death. But the battle was not over. The Boltons still lingered, their filth not yet fully wiped from the north. Somewhere in the shadows, Ramsay Bolton was hiding, recovering, biding his time, and plotting his revenge. With Winterfell secure, we marched towards Barrowton, carving a path straight through the north on our way to King's Landing. The town's garrison was strong, around 400 defenders, but walls mean little to the dead. We brought down their fortifications and starved out the survivors. When the time came to charge, Bran led the assault on his white unicorn, a haunting sight against the backdrop of blood and snow. The defenders fought with honor, putting up a respectable resistance, but they were no match for our endless horde. Overwhelmed and outnumbered, Barrowton fell. Inside the tavern we found a familiar face, Samwell Tarly, or at least what was left of him. He had turned into a White Walker, shedding a considerable amount of weight along the way. We had the option to recruit him, but his skills were underwhelming. A shame, really. As we left the city, Barbary Dustin rallied her forces and besieged Barrowton, desperate to reclaim her home. But Bran wasn't about to let that happen. He chased her across the battlefield, cornering her for a duel. To her credit, she fought well, better than most lords. But in the end, it wasn't enough. We shattered her army, and Bran chopped off her head. From Barrowton, we marched further south, our conquest relentless. Grey Water Watch fell first, an effortless siege with barely any resistance. But our eyes were set on a grander prize. We traveled to the Twins, biding our time until Walder Frey was inside the city. Once our prey was trapped within his own walls, we besieged the fortress. With a ram in place, the assault began. Bran scaled the long stone walls using ladders, but the Freys swarmed him from every direction. They stabbed him in the back over and over, exploiting every gap in his dark armor. He fought back, carving through their ranks, but the endless waves left him overwhelmed. Surrounded and stunned, his frozen flesh could endure only so much. Bran was knocked out. With Bran down, Len the Loyal took charge once again. He annihilated the remnants on the walls, cutting through the Freys like they were nothing. Despite their numbers, the Frey troops lacked the strength to hold us back. The Twins was ours. Justice was swift. Walder Frey, the traitor, was executed. His innocent wife was spared, but his sons and daughters met the same fate as their father. We even found a few Lannisters among them. None survived. But as we celebrated our victory, news came from the south. The Crown's army had seized Grey Water Watch. We waited, watching from the shadows as the army left the castle, heading north to besiege the Twins. We kept a low profile, letting them set up their siege camp. With the aid of our garrisons, we assaulted their camp. Their cavalry, trapped between the brutal clash of infantry, had nowhere to run. The Tyroshi and Lannister troops were heavily armored, but even their finest steel couldn't withstand Bran's ice spear. The battlefield became a graveyard, their once proud banners trampled under the rotten feet of our undead horde. We captured 9 royalists, and as expected, they were all executed. As the dust settled, Len the Loyal claimed his prize, a full set of King's Guard gear, fitting for the man who never faltered. The road to King's Landing was painted red with blood, and we were far from done. As we marched toward Grey Water Watch to reclaim what was ours, news reached us. Another army was besieging the Twins. We abandoned our siege and rushed back to defend. It was an army of 900, led by none other than Cersei Lannister. The Whore Queen of Westeros had left her throne to fight her own battles. Another force, also 900 strong, led by Renfred, was on its way to reinforce her. But the moment they spotted our army, they turned tail and ran. We assaulted Cersei's siege camp. Among her ranks was the bastard Ramsay. The battle began with the Lannister cavalry crashing into our White's shield wall. They got stuck, unable to break through, and were brutally slaughtered where they stood. Meanwhile, another cavalry formation attempted to flank our giant archers. A brave but stupid move. They were decimated with ease. More horses rode to charge. And then Bran found himself face to face with Queen Cersei. He reared up her horse and killed it with a few thrusts. Cersei was brave enough to join the battlefield, but not smart enough to wear armor. Her cute little dress was the only thing covering her flesh. Bran toyed with her, calmly parrying her frantic attacks. He dropped her sword without him needing to do a thing. He kicked her in the guts. Let's hope she wasn't pregnant in this timeline. Then, with a cold, merciless thrust, he drove his sword between her teeth. A few swings later, she crumpled to the ground. With the queen dead, Bran turned his attention back to the stuck cavalry, cutting them down one by one. The infantry lines clashed soon after, and another cavalry formation attempted to flank from the left wing. Bran stalled them long enough for his whites to regroup, then returned to assist his infantry. The enemy started to flee, until the second infantry wave arrived. It was a brutal clash. Many of our whites were slaughtered. Our first formation was eliminated, but Bran kept fighting, his spear piercing through armor and flesh alike. As our second wave and giants walked into the fight, the enemy morale shattered. This time, when they fled, they didn't look back. Bran continued to kill the cowards, farming polearm experience like it was a training dummy. We won with 91 casualties. Cersei and 12 more lords were captured. But the slimy bastard Ramsay, he slithered away once again. His time will come. We executed Cersei, ending the reign of the Whore Queen. But guess who sits on the Iron Throne now? Baron Trant.
Baron fucking Trant.
Yep, Baron fucking Trant. One can't go on, another rose. Westeros never changes. There was no rest for Bran. He executed every other captured lord without hesitation. Bael the Marauder decided to upgrade his armor with Cersei's dress. A ridiculous sight, but somehow it offered incredible resistances. Magic, perhaps. Not long after, Daenerys Targaryen finally made her move. She invaded Westeros with her Dothraki hordes, her Unsullied, and of course, her 3 dragons. Meanwhile, Renfred, the coward who once fled from battle, had returned to besiege the twins. He waited just out of sight and ambushed his camp. His army mirrored Cersei's, a mix of heavy cavalry and heavily armored Tyroshi and Lannister infantry. And just like Cersei's forces, they put up a decent fight but were eventually overwhelmed. Among the captured was the wimp Lancel Lannister. We executed him along with the rest of the Lannisters. Bael the Marauder had proven his loyalty in blood. We rewarded him with his own party, 150 sadistic whites to defend the twins while Bran was away. Then we returned to Winterfell, where Bran handed over 800 troops to Sigorn the Red. He took fresh recruits from Winterfell's garrison, and as many Stark elites as he could get from Roderick. After training them for a while, Bran marched south once again, but this time with Sigorn the Red at his side. They laid siege to Seagard, but Sigorn had other plans. Chasing glory, or perhaps just his own ego, he abandoned the army. Not like Bran had a choice. He let him go. Bran took Seagard with his own party, then ordered Sigorn to besiege Raventree Hall while he marched on to take the Fair Market. Bran's undead horde filled the Fair Market with the corpses of Lannisters and Tyroshi. Another town reduced to a graveyard, another graveyard destined to rise in Bran's service. He ordered Bell to patrol the town and, as always, executed a few more Lannisters for good measure. Meanwhile, Sigorn had taken Raventree Hall. There was no time for celebration. Bran ordered him to march on Stonehenge, while we continued south toward Harroway. Another town, another massacre. The streets flooded with blood as its fallen were resurrected to fight for Bran. Shortly after, Sigorn secured Stonehenge, but the war was relentless. He barely had time to catch his breath before an enemy army besieged our newly taken Harroway. Without hesitation, Sigorn crushed the invaders. No rest for the dead. With the north secure, both Bran and Sigorn set their sights on the heart of Westeros, King's Landing. But Stonehenge was besieged again, forcing Bran to order Sigorn to defend it. At the same time, Raventree Hall came under attack. This time, Bael was sent to protect it. That left Bran to assault King's Landing with only his own party. The city stood defiant, with 1,400 defenders, and their militia weren't mere peasants. They were gold cloaks, ardent and disciplined. The walls were indestructible, and their siege weapons relentless. We built melee siege engines and trebuchets to destroy their mangonels, but they rebuilt them faster than we could tear them down. The garrison's food stock seemed endless. We waited and waited, but there was no starving them out. Time was too precious to waste. The assault had to begin. Bran led the charge. climbing the walls as the gold cloaks swarmed. In the narrow corridors of the siege tower, our forces were cornered at the edge. Then a catapult struck. The blast annihilated our troops and left Bran with barely 10% of his strength. Bloodied but unbroken, he kept fighting, dealing as much damage as he could, until a spear found his neck, knocked out. But the battle wasn't over. Then the Loyal took charge once again. With the gates broken, our undead horde flooded the city. Len flanked the enemy infantry, his rapier slicing through flesh with brutal efficiency. Street after street, we cleared out every gold cloak, Kingsguard and Lannister who dared to stand in our way. Len climbed the walls to finish the last remnants. From the Archer Tower, he gazed upon the Grand Sept, towering above the countless buildings. King's Landing was ours. The capital had fallen, but the war was far from over. Bran found Lord Varys inside the tavern. He was a White Walker now. Bran recruited him on the spot and appointed him as the governor of King's Landing. After all, who better to govern a city of corpses than a man with no cock? Before leaving, Bran treated himself to some well-deserved drip. He bought a sleek black gold helmet and a black and gold cape, achieving maximum style points. Then, with the slow, deliberate steps of a king, he walked toward the Iron Throne. When he finally sat, his icy butt froze the iron to minus 100 degrees Celsius, making it physically impossible for anyone else to sit on it. The throne belonged to Bran, and Bran alone. After claiming his seat, he wandered the Red Keep and stumbled upon Grand Maester Pycelle. Somehow, the old fucker had survived all the destruction and chaos. Cockroaches always find a way. Bran bought some milk of the puppy from him, more for the flex than the need. Then it was time for a council meeting. Small council became quite small indeed. Only Varys and Bran sat at the table. With the Iron Throne now under his control, Bran had access to some of history's greatest weapons and armor. Robert Baratheon's mighty warhammer and Rhaegar Targaryen's elegant armor. But Bran wasn't interested in relics. His current drip was unmatched. Instead, he handed out the legendary gear to his companions, except for Robert's hammer. That was too tempting not to try. With his undead horde at his back, he marched west, to end the Lannisters once and for all. On the way west, Bran spotted Gregor Clegane's army, the Mountain himself, a brute so massive that even death would need a bigger sight. But today, he was caught between Bran's undead horde and Belmore's forces, a dead sandwich with no way out. As the battle began, Bran casually one-shotted one of the enemy lords before even crossing the bridge. Then another. By the time his infantry started marching, he had already torn through the enemy archers. On his way back to support his infantry, he spotted Tywin Lannister himself. One thrust of the ice spear, and the lion was knocked out. Meanwhile, the enemy cavalry got stuck inside the bridge. Our infantry carved through them like they were harvesting wheat. But then, through the chaos, Gregor Clegane emerged, a walking mountain, plowing straight through our lines. He was quickly unhorsed, overwhelmed by our undead horde. Bran pulled out Robert's warhammer, aiming to crush through the thick armor. The mountain was knocked out before he could do any real damage. Bran kept using the hammer against the rest of the army, but it felt like he was hitting them with a wet log. Pity range, pity damage. The only thing legendary about it was the disappointment. He switched back to his ice spear, a weapon that never failed to penetrate everything in his path. The second bridge became a meat grinder, with both infantries clashing in brutal, endless waves. In the chaos, Bran tried the hammer again, hoping the close quarters would give it an edge. Nope, still shit. Before long, the enemy started to flee. Another victory. Bran faced the captured Tywin Lannister. The old lion lay in the mud, eyes wide with disbelief. A man who had spent his entire life building a dynasty, now watching it crumble in real time. He understood. This was the end. Then it was Gregor Clegane's turn. Patty smiled like a dumb kid. his only brain cell failing to grasp the fatality of the situation. The blood debt of the Martells was finally paid. One by one, every captured lord met the same fate. House Clegane eliminated. Thandor had abandoned it long ago. Then Bran's army marched to Ashemark, Ramsay Bolton's last remaining fief. We hunted the bastard down until he was cornered like a rat in his own castle. Its walls crumbled with little resistance. As death loomed over him, Ramsay smiled. That same twisted grin etched into his face until the very end. His head was severed with a single merciless stroke, and his body was thrown to the undead hounds, torn apart like the monster he was. Then we marched to Casterly Rock, the heart of Lannister power. But Tywin had drained its garrison, leaving only a hollow shell. They crumbled like dried leaves beneath our undead horde. His once proud home paid the price for his sins, its golden halls now defiled by the accursed dead. But Lannisport still stood, proud, wealthy, and alive. Unacceptable. Its 1100 defenders guarded the gates with resolve, but after taking King's Landing, this was merely another step toward total domination. Bran breached one side of the wall alone, a storm of ice and fury. Swarmed by soldiers, he carved a path through the tower, cutting down Lannisters in a bloody whirlwind. His body bore the bite of countless bolts. He staggered, but kept fighting. Finally, exhaustion took him. He was knocked out. Len the Loyal took charge once again. With mighty swings of his giant axe, he shattered the second gate single-handedly. A brutal clash erupted in the gateway. Our troops fell in droves, crushed beneath the rocks hurled by desperate defenders. But we endured. We swarmed the city center, painting the green grass red with Lannister blood. The rich lands of the Lions were now ours. Inside the tavern of Lannisport, we found Tyrion Lannister, a White Walker now, with skills even more impressive than Lord Varys. But fate was cruel. We had no room for more companions. Bran, disappointed with Robert's hammer, equipped the Mountain Sword, a weapon worthy of his strength. He handed Brightroar the ancestral sword of House Lannister to Lane the Loyal, another symbol of Lannister pride, now wielded by the undead. Next on our list was Storm's End. On the way, we spotted the king without a throne, Baron Trant, laying siege to a castle. We assaulted the Tomato Faces army. The lines clashed in a narrow valley, his troops glowing yellow with gold cloaks and Tyroshi soldiers. Bran carved through them with Gregor's giant sword, far better than Robert's useless hammer. Then he found Meryn Trant. A few swings later, the so-called king was face down in the dirt. We crushed the remaining forces wave after wave. Meryn begged for mercy, but it was too late. He and every traitor who rode alongside him were executed. The royalists, in their infinite wisdom, crowned another member of the king's guard, Boros Blond, as their new king. We finally marched on Storm's End. Like every other stronghold before it, the mighty fortress crumbled beneath our undead horde. With its fall, Cersei's loyalists had lost every inch of land in Westeros, but the continent was far from secure. Another tyrant still roamed the land, one more dangerous than any we had faced before. Daenerys Targaryen, the mother of dragons. She had traveled to our lands in the north. We marched to find her, only to witness a sight more terrifying than anything Bran had ever seen. Drogon, a beast so massive it blocked out the sun. The Unsullied and Dothraki stood by her side, ready to answer her call. Our undead horde advanced across the snowy field as the beast marched menacingly. Bran started cutting down the Dothraki, unarmored lunatics who barely slowed our advance. But then Drogon let out a deafening roar and bathed our ranks in flames, turning countless to ash. Bran charged the beast, but with a single swipe of its massive claws, his unicorn was crushed. He mounted a Dothraki horse and kept cutting through their ranks, only for Drogon to kill this mount too. A third horse. Same result. This time Bran himself was knocked out by a careless flick of the dragon's claws. Our savior, Len the Loyal, took charge once again. He tore through the Unsullied with brutal efficiency. But Drogon wasn't done. Another wave of fire turned entire formations to ash. Each colossal step cracked the earth, throwing Len off balance. He charged at the beast's head, but another misstep sent him tumbling. Drogon casually trampled him, knocking him out. Now it was Erak's turn to prove his worth. Another breath of fire. Another formation wiped out. The snow itself glowed with flame. No one could get close. Anyone who dared was swatted aside like a toy. And then Daenerys made her biggest mistake. Drunk with confidence, she charged straight through our horde. Drogon was swarmed, and even a dragon can only endure so many blows. The beast collapsed. Erak let out a triumphant roar, standing before the unconscious monster. Then he found her, the mother of dragons herself, lying unconscious in the snow. Damn, charging like that was really stupid. But respect. She still managed to kill 250 of our troops. When Bran finally woke up, he confronted her. She accepted her fate with quiet defiance. We chopped her head off and raised Drogon to do our bidding. And then there was Lan. The man proudly wore her silver hair and dress. I don't know what's with my white walkers and cross-dressing, but hey, we respect their free will. We attacked a castle to test the strength of our newly resurrected Drogon. His fiery breath melted the gates with ease. But there was one problem. He was too damn big to fit inside. So, as always, we had to handle the rest ourselves. After the battle, Bran returned to King's Landing and visited the stables to teach Drogon how to fly. With the basics down, it was time for a real test. We set our sights on Duskendale. Drogon soared over the walls, breathing fire upon the defenders. But controlling the beast was harder than Bran expected. Half the time, it was pure chaos. But when it worked, damn, it was fun watching our enemies burn. Once satisfied, Bran leapt from the dragon's back to continue the fight on foot. Before long, Duskendale was ours. Our final objective was clear. Dragonstone. Bran soared over the long bridge on Drogon's back, flames raining down as they blasted the gates open. The beast flew upward to target the archers, but something was off. Drogon refused to aim properly, and suddenly dropped Bran from his back. Maybe he didn't want to burn his ancestors' home, or maybe he was just being a little shit. Either way, Bran wasn't waiting for answers. He drew the mountain sword and smashed through the second gate, and carved his way through the beautiful black stone streets, glowing red with fire. He kept pushing, barely able to walk, giving everything he had until he was finally knocked out. As always, Len took charge. Our horde swept through the remaining defenders, leaving the black walls painted with human corpses. The Targaryen dynasty was ours. Len's lifeless blue eyes flickered with satisfaction as he stared at the grim beauty of Dragonstone. Bran pushed open the gates to his new throne room. The abyssal throne stood tall, dark, and imposing, a far better fit for him than the Iron Throne ever could be. His goal was complete. Every great danger that once plagued Westeros was gone. And this was the story of how a White Walker saved the realm in just 587 days. With no purpose left, Bran the Destroyer sought out the real Bran Stark of this timeline, the human one, and gifted him a dragonglass axe to end it all. As a final act, he used dark magic to grant him something else too, his legs. The real Bran gripped the axe with all his might, and brought an end to the White Walker who had saved Westeros. Bran the Destroyer could finally rest. His undead horde collapsed with him, like puppets with their strings cut. And so, House Stark rose again, led by the living Bran. Arya and Sansa were both doing well. Jon, still chilling at the Summer Isles. The realm had been disinfected, and our family was finally free. Thanks for watching, guys. I highly recommend trying Realm of Thrones if you haven't already. There's so much more you can do beyond what I pulled off in this playthrough. If you want more Bannerlord content like this, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe. See you all in the next one.